What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Different Lens podcast. My name is Juan Felipe Sierra Cortez. I've been in the entertainment industry for the past 13 years, and this is...
And I'm Daniel. I'm just your usual nerd. I like games, movies, music, anime, you name it.
You name it, we got it. 10 episodes, bro.
That's right. This is
God
episode
damn.
10.
Yeah.
We made it.
Yes, sir. All right. So, what do we have in the docket today?
So today, in this 10th episode, we're going to get a little touchy. We're going to get a little bit into a bit of a touchy territory, right? Which is cancel culture, which is, it affects everything basically that we talk about on a daily basis.
Correct.
Well, on our podcast. But I
on
mean,
a weekly basis.
But it does affect daily.
Correct. Yeah, it can.
Many artists, actors, artists, directors, different areas are being affected by cancel culture. And so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about it today. How do you feel about that?
I believe cancel culture, I mean, there's a difference between like rightful anger and cancel culture. Because I believe that there's like a good sense of rightful anger when somebody's a total piece of shit. Like Harvey Weinstein, like, you know, all of those motherfuckers. But I do also believe that there's people that are way too sensitive and into their feelings. So there are going to be those people that just want to bitch and complain and ruin it for everybody.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I do believe that there's a lot of common sense when there's righteous, rightful anger, because a lot of those people are pieces of shit, you know?
Yeah.
You've had, you know, child molesters, you've had... you know, rapists, you've had molesters, you've had, you know, grifters, you've had thieves, you have...
I mean, there's simply no way for you to, or anybody to defend them.
Yeah.
Right? Especially when...
And people still do, like what we talked in the past, that just because they're hot or just because they're famous, they get a pass, and it's like, no, like people shouldn't get a pass for that shit.
Yeah. And it's something that has been canceling. It's something that has been ongoing for a very long time, right? For a very long time. However, with the inevitable rise of social media, right, we've started to see a lot more people getting canceled, more actors, singers, and you know, it became more prevalent from a Google search that I was looking in and statistics and data towards 2018, 2017. Right, maybe towards that time, that's when the actual term clean culture was started to be more looked up on.
Correct.
Right, and eventually people started getting cut more often here and there. Right, one of the biggest ones that I remember right now, it's Kevin Hart. Oh yeah, he was supposed to be the host of the Oscars.
The Oscars in 2019, I believe. Yeah,
and they brought things up from tweets that he had from like I think it's like 2012 or something like that. About
2009.
But they were like whatever year, but it was long time, and it was tweets about, you know, homosexuality and him, you know, just making some
crude jokes,
some comments, right? And again, not to defend, right, making jokes about the LGBT community or anything like that, right? But nonetheless, there were comments that he made, right? As a comedian, he made some comments, he made some tweets, and you know, unfortunately, he couldn't do the Oscars.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I think that, like, bringing up tweets and stuff like that from so long ago, I think I don't know, I think it's kind of stupid.
You think it's petty?
I think it's petty. I think it's just vindictive. I think it's just kind of stupid because, you know, we're different people in different times. So the jokes that I make now are going to be different to the jokes that I'm going to make in 10 years to the jokes that I made 10 years ago. Right. Why? Because, you know, I'm mature. I've gotten better at communicating. You know, I have a career now. So like, you know, 10 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, fuck everybody, whatever. I would have said some horrendous things.
And I don't doubt that we did.
We for sure did. Yeah, for sure. We did in high school.
Exactly. Growing up, I'm sure we said our fair share of things.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
For sure.
But yeah, I mean, going back as far as to cancel someone's I guess, present because of something that has happened years and years ago, right?
When it comes to comments,
Right.
Because if they did something like seriously horrendous, no, fuck that person.
No, yeah. If we start thinking more like now we go to kind of like the music world, when we think about P. Diddy,
correct,
right? When we think about R. Kelly, right?
Correct.
When we're thinking about rape, child molestation, child pornography,
Yeah.
all of that thing,
blackmailing,
those things are not condoned whatsoever, right? We can't condone any of that whatsoever because obviously rape is a really big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Child molestation is really big too. Mm-hmm. Child pornography is huge, and obviously, blackmailing as well has it's very negative.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to comments, but I think Kevin Hart has been on the spotlight for scandals. I think for also being abusive and stuff like that.
He was a cheater. Like he cheated on his wife, I believe, with a stripper or something like that.
But didn't he also hit her?
To be honest, I don't care enough about his career, his life to care or kind of stay on top of it.
Yeah. I think there was a bit of something in there, but whatever. But, overall, I mean, in terms of the rest of, for example, some artists or directors that are known to have committed certain things, how do you feel about these allegations coming, to light after so many years?
I'm glad because it kind of takes the veil off of Hollywood that everything is perfect and everything is beautiful and everybody's happy and kumbaya. So I like when people are put into positions of pressure. That was such an alliteration. People putting in pressure, whatever. And I like the fact that, the truth is out. Yeah. However sour or detrimental it could be to anybody, if you're a scumbag, you get the axe. I love the fact that we can now look at things and be like, no, this is not okay.
Correct.
People are trying to create art and to create, worlds and to create beautiful things. So, and a lot of it comes through pain, whether it's, personal or professional or whatever, but it shouldn't be derived from horrendous things that some douchebag, just because they want to feel control over somebody else, is going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Now, and this is not to degrade on anybody's feelings or the horrific things that they went through.
Correct.
But, it also raises the question of validity on terms of after so many years, right? How many of these claims are actually accurate, right? Because, when allegations started to happen, let's use, for example, Bill Cosby, right? A lot of allegations started happening and then just a lot more people started coming forward and saying, hey, I was abused too. And again, this is not to say that they weren't. I'm just saying, there's a lot of those allegations that started happening. I think there was a movement, I think it's called Me Too.
Me Too movement, yeah.
Me Too, right? And then a lot of people just started coming out and saying, you know what, this Kevin Spacey also did this to me. This other person did this to me. When it comes to the validity of those things, how do you feel about that? Like, it's a lot of things that are said from things that happen. Allegations are very old.
There is, like, legally there is such a thing as statute of limitations. Unless there's new evidence, like there's gonna be a lot of things that are gonna be omitted, unfortunately. But you also got to look at the context of, at the time they were untouchable. At the time they were able to hide a lot of things. So even evidence wasn't as prevalent as it is now, because now we have, every person has a computer and cameras and satellite imaging, and everybody has all of that in their pocket.
Yeah, it's a cyber footprint.
Correct. So it's much easier to gather evidence at the click of a button, literally. So before, you would have to go through this horrendously rigorous process in order to gather evidence, especially of abuse. Like, how do you, especially at a time where, these people were on top of the world, how do you gather evidence, so much evidence about them to actually get them convicted? And it is terrible that it's happened, with the whole documentary on Dan Schneider and all of that with Quiet on the Set, which we have spoken in the past. But I'm glad that all of those people are not only coming out, but actually being treated with much more decency and respect, like Amanda Bynes, like Drake Bell, like, all of those people. And I'm glad, and I want to kind of like directly thank you to Jerry Trainer for being such a stand-up guy and to know that, you know, you couldn't do a lot, but you still took care of the kids from iCarly, and you made sure that, you know, they weren't in a set alone with Dan Schneider, and you protected them. So you are a very much stand-up guy, and I thank you for it, and the internet loves you for it, and you are a man of fucking principles. That being said,
Yeah, no, I cannot only imagine how difficult it was made for them in the past to come up with, you know, and be able to bring these allegations into light. I'm sure they made it almost impossible. Like you're saying, you know, these are actors, musicians that were on top of the world. You know, trying to come up with these allegations, I'm sure was very difficult, right? And trying to prove it, like you're saying, trying to show people that they were actually, you know, like bringing, you know, compiling everything. I'm sure it was very difficult.
Correct.
And you know, whatever it is, whatever the case was, I hope that, you know, being able to bring it up now, even though it's so many years later, I'm hoping that this kind of helps bring a little bit of closure to that.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure it was very rough.
You're correct.
And then seeing them get away with it, I'm sure it was
horrendous,
Yeah.
and it was unfair. And I like the fact that now, like, the biggest progenitor of the whole thing was Angelina Jolie when she came out against Harvey Weinstein and said, hey, yeah, you know, I had to do what I had to do to, you know, secure my career.
Yeah.
So to see somebody with such a pull when it comes to the industry, to be able to see that person come out and say, you know what, no, I'm standing up for that. I don't believe that's right. I'm going to say something about it. Now, a lot more people were more encouraged and were a lot more like motivated to come forward, and because they couldn't be so silenced anymore, because now they have somebody to rally behind. And I'm so glad that happened. Now, there's the other side of the coin, where now we're seeing people just being accused for X or Y reason. That's why
where I was going to go next.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to make the delineation between rightful anger and like just pettiness and vindictiveness.
With the rise of social media, right? You know, I feel like there is a generation that was kind of created amongst all the generations that, you know, are going through, right? We're millennials,
Correct.
Gen Zs, whatever.
Correct.
But I feel like there's also a generation kind of growing up with the internet that it should be kind of a generation of its own, because that is a generation that has been growing up with social media, with the internet, with direct access to it. You know, at 10 years old, we have kids that are getting now phones.
Correct.
And, you know, eventually they are growing up on the side of seeing so much cyberbullying, seeing so much of this cancellation for whatever reason. And I understand there's that freedom of speech that you need to have, right? And people are taken into the social media to kind of also open up about a lot of things. But it has also opened the doors, continue to open the doors for a lot of bullying, for a lot of cancellation, for, you know, everything, ostracizing, for a lot of reasons. Sometimes they're valid reasons,
Correct.
like we're saying, but then sometimes I feel like they're taking a little bit too far, right? So in some instances, what do you feel like, how do you feel about that? Like that when we're going into more of a cancellation for the, you know,
regular Joes.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like, you know, when you see some of the stories of, you know, the Karens being just complete monsters to people, because you shouldn't treat people like that, period. No matter how angry you are, you shouldn't treat people like shit.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, people are still going to be people. And I'm sure each and every single one of us has pissed somebody off so much that they wanted to kick her asses. So, you know, we should just treat people with decency and just kind of either not pay, like, or not pay, not come back, or not pay, or, you know, just do what you need to do to resolve the situation peacefully. I think also that it normalizes being a victim.
Right.
Now, being a victim, it's not bad, but being a victim consistently and constantly, it is, because you're gonna be ill prepared for life, or you're gonna encounter a lot of scumbags. It creates a victimhood mentality to the point where now people cannot recognize hardship for being hardship, but it's always my mental health, my it's triggering, and it gets to a point where it's like, bro, you need to face some consequences. You need to face some fucking hard truths in life. You need to face reality.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sound like an old fart, but I do think that this generations coming up are going to be ill prepared for a lot of the things that we like. For example, we are ill prepared for a lot of things that our parents were prepared properly. And going back and back and back and
Yeah.
back. Why? Because we're trying to make our lives easier. We're trying to make our lives better.
Yeah.
So, and we're getting to a point where the pendulum is going the other way. Now, before it was nobody would listen to women. Women weren't heard, which was horrendous. But now it's going to the other side of now men are not being heard, and men are not, like women are victims for everything, and that's not it.
Yeah.
There was a story from I believe it was 2021 or 2022 that a woman accused a guy of raping her, and the guy lost his college, like he was kicked out of everything, and he ended up committing suicide. And the lady came out afterwards saying, "No, I just wanted to fit in with a group of friends that they all said that they got molested or that they got sexually abused or raped or whatever, and she just wanted to belong." And that's not right. And I hope that lady faces jail time because she cost somebody's life. So I now so like I said, it's going from one side of the pendulum to the other. So we need to find balance.
Yeah.
We need to find hard, good evidence, which now is gonna be lost even more.
Yeah, I was
with
gonna
AI.
say, as I was gonna say, finding evidence now it's gonna be so much more difficult.
Yeah.
Like you were gonna say with AI, everything now it can be altered, generated. All the way from replicating your voice to replicating your image to probably placing someone in in a scene of a crime or texting, falsifying a lot of stuff. So it's terrible, right?
And I think that the warnings that people have given us, we've largely ignored. And the warnings that we give people are going to be largely ignored too until it's too late. Look, I'm a big proponent of I don't like groups of people. I like individuals, because in groups of people you lose not only the sense of identity, but also the sense of fairness, because now everything becomes either you're with us or you're against us. So when the whole Me Too movement came up, I was skeptical but hopeful. I was skeptical of how far are they going to take this and how maliciously it's going to turn into. But I was hopeful in the sense that I hope that people get help, and I hope that people are finding the resources that they need in order to get better, and that the scumbags that are doing all of this, that are perpetrating all of this, get fucking thrown in jail. And they get fucking, it costs them everything, because there's people that not even jail like is that big of a deterrent. Hell, go to their fucking pockets, go to their fucking properties, go to their fucking anything that they own, and deprive them of that. But now I also think both men and women, because let's not lie to each other, men can be sexually abused too. I've seen, I've had friends of mine,
physically, mentally, emotionally,
correct.
everything.
I've had friends, and I've seen it firsthand. A guy being physically and emotionally abused, and when he came forward for that, the woman lied, and she said that he was beating her, and they both ended up in jail when he was the victim, and that is not right. So all of this is about balance. Guys, please, guys and girls and everything in between, please, let's just find balance. Seek the truth. Seek honesty.
It's really hard. We can sit here and plead for people to, take conscience and being a little bit more fair. But at the end of the day, when it comes to something that affects your personal life, it's your problem is the biggest problem always. Right. So regardless of what happens, when you see that your life could be impacted, then the problem becomes bigger than it is, and they have to make it about themselves. And that is going to continue to happen regardless.
Let me ask you something. What do you feel, since you're not in the entertainment industry at all, what do you feel or how do you think people should, because there are people that are YouTubers that are pranks or whatever, and they go out to get people fired and they go out to get people in trouble. Why do you think those people keep getting rewarded, and how do you think they should get deterred from making that kind of content?
So the main thing, as I was saying a little bit earlier, is the rise of social media. The most valuable currency that there is right now is attention, right? And by going out and doing things you're not supposed to, going against the rules, messing people up, right? That is the most valuable currency they have. And they will go ahead and do anything to continue to do that. For example, just let's take a look at Mr. Beast, right? I enjoy, some of his videos. I think they're funny and everything. But, at the end of the day, he is maintaining the views. He's maintaining the attention by spending crazy amount of money. He's throwing crazy amounts of money in there, like millions, right? And cars, and I'm sure there's so much. Not to say that he hasn't done some good things, because I know
the wells in Africa.
He's done some good, right? So he's one of those persons that is not just doing it maybe for the money, but he's doing also good stuff. But then there are other individuals who are just attention seeking, and they have to do it in a negative way, which is affecting, like you're saying, individuals, and they just keep on doing it, and people keep watching. Simple as that. Somebody uploads a TikTok video, they go watch it. They are, I don't know, harassing a Walmart employee, and the Walmart employee shows up and curses them out for whatever reason because they're upset of something. That person gets fired and the other one makes money, and that's not okay. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the way of making feel people uncomfortable. I don't agree with going out of your way to be scandalous in a public place like that. I just don't agree with it.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the story of this guy that he was just literally just, I believe he was an Uber driver or just like one of those like delivery service employees, that he was just grabbing food from a restaurant at a mall, and he was just gonna go deliver that food. Normal thing on that day. But this YouTuber asshole decided to fucking harass him until the guy pulled a gun and shot him. He shot him in the stomach. Thankfully, the guy's alive.
Right.
But the other guy went to jail because he pulled a gun in a public space. And he's like, bro, this other scumbag should get thrown in jail too for harassment and for being a fucking nuisance and a menace to society.
Yeah. The other guy was doing his job.
He was just doing his job. He was
100%.
just walking around, just, doing what he needed to do. So I think there should be a bigger deterrent in social media. Now, let's kind of flip the script a little bit, because we've been getting like really negative with this whole thing. But I
wanted to, before you continue, before we switch into something a little more positive, I did want to talk a little bit about comedians and how the media has changed, right? And especially how now I feel like a lot of people are also showing content or releasing content. More content creators are going into a more acceptable media for their audience. In other words, back in the day, we used to have like more of, we still do, but it was more prevalent, like South Park, Happy Three Friends, all these crazy stuff
drawn together.
That had some jokes that you're like, jeez. Like some jokes were dark. Comedians themselves were a lot more dark with their comedy. They would straight up attack a whole ethnicity, right? They would just go and be like, I don't know, say something very racist or say something very stereotypical. And now towards the latter years, they have to tone that down because they're kind of like stepping on eggshells, right? And I know some care, some don't care too much, right? I know we have comedians like what is it, Gervais?
Ricky Gervais.
Ricky Gervais. He's a little bit more,
or Bill Burr. Or,
He's like, F that thing, man. I'm gonna say what I want to say.
Correct.
And some people are still with them, but then some other people are like, oh, that guy's an asshole.
Yeah.
I think feel about that. That's like,
look, it's gonna be really difficult to please anybody, anyways. So if you're speaking from, like, one of my favorite comedians is Jimmy Carr. Jimmy Carr is an amazing comedian, but he knows how to put people down and make them look like fucking morons, which I love. So you don't need to be an asshole to make a good joke. That is the difference between a good comedian and a fucking douchebag. I've seen Bill Burr, I've seen Dave Chappelle, I've seen, many comedians put people down and do horrendous things that if anybody else would have said it, you would be like, dude, you're a fucking piece of shit. But they know how to structure it properly, so it has a message. It has a point. I just saw Bill Burr not too long ago shitting on Democrats.
I love Bill Burr.
Bill Burr is amazing, and I love his rants because his rants always have a point. So I've seen him shit on Democrats, shit on Republicans, shit on Americans, shit on Europeans, shit on everybody. But it's the sense that he is not mean-spirited. It's the sense that he's just having fun. Unless you provoke him, unless you try to come after you, he will fucking destroy you.
Yeah. And I'm sure he's been on the other side of the spectrum of getting all the hate, right? Or getting all the cancellation.
Especially during the pandemic.
Because of everything that he says. Yeah. But I feel like also people need to kind of allow themselves to understand that it's a joke. It's a joke. There's a lot of things that are, they're comedians. They're trying to make fun of things. They're trying to lighten up a little bit, bring a little bit of joy to people. Mm-hmm. Obviously, one joke for me that recently was that I was kind of like, oh, that was a kind of distasteful joke. It was the joke about Puerto Rico, floating island of garbage.
Yeah, correct.
When you're attacking a whole entire territory and stuff like that. I mean, I can see how it was very harmful for the people.
Yeah,
it was a joke, but I don't think that was the place to make that joke.
It's just all of it was not in the appropriate way because you're speaking at a political rally.
Yeah,
from somebody that, first of all, with somebody that is very divisive as it is, and you're talking to a group of people that A, are American, and B, it's because of continental Americans that it is looking how it is looking right now. Yeah. Because of gentrification, because of people trying to escape for taxes or whatever, they've turned the island into shit. And Puerto Ricans are the first ones to say, no, bro, fuck these. That's what I'm saying. There's a difference between a joke and somebody trying to be smarmy and try to be like, we've seen 1,000 times people trying to be an asshole and just be like, oh, but relax, bro, it's a joke. And it's like, no, you're a fucking douchebag. There's a difference.
Yeah. There's definitely jokes across the line.
Yeah, correct. For example, Gabriel Iglesias made fun of an entire religion. First of all, knowingly. Second of all, with facts, with knowledge, with care, because that's a difference between somebody that really is passionate about comedy, that is willing to fly to another country, meet with people, get to know the culture, get to know the stereotypes, so he can play to those stereotypes too, and he could, people that are and are not from that religion could laugh at it. He said a joke that he met a prince. And that he had a bunch of hawks with hoods. And he goes, oh, they look like little hostages. Shit, sorry. Everybody laughed at that. Why? Yeah. Because he's not being like, oh, yeah, just like they always say about, Muslim. No, he didn't say it like that.
Yeah.
It was kind of like something that came out and he's like, shit, we've all been there. We've all had that moment where we're like, I shouldn't have fucking said that. So, again, that is the difference between a good comedian that actually cares for the craft and is willing to spend the time to know and to develop the craft in a good way, and somebody that is just a fucking asshole. The same guy that has a comedy series or whatever, that the whole thing is that he tries to humiliate people that are on the up and up, that they're trying to be comedians. And the whole thing is that he invites a bunch of other comedians to put him down. And Bill Burr called him out. Bill Burr did that. Bill Burr was like, no, what you're doing is actually harming the comedians because you're putting down people that have good material. It's just that you just want to put them down because you want to feel smarter, So, yeah. So this whole thing is about douchebaggery, basically.
Yeah.
The lesson of the day is don't be a fucking douchebag.
But hey, listen, let us know down in the comments. Join the conversation. Let us know how you feel. Let us know if there's any specific comedian you feel like crosses the line, and one that does balance the line very well. Because again, there is comedians that balance the line very well.
Oh yeah.
Whether you can kind of be like, but at the same time, they're great. But then there are others, like you're saying, they're just assholes.
Yeah, look, my favorite comedian of all time, it's George Carlin. Mm-hmm. He was such a trailblazer when it comes to a lot of things that one of his jokes is called "The 7 Things You Can't Say on TV." That joke was so strong and so anti-government and so this is getting ridiculous, to the point that because of that joke, they were able to pass new censorship laws in the 70s. Or kind of have, if you've ever listened to George Carlin, you know that all of his jokes from the 60s, 70s, and 80s are still prevalent today. You can relate to them today 40, 50, 60 years later.
Yeah.
You know, he died in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
His jokes are still all around social media, to the point where people are like, bro, we haven't grown up in 60 years. Technology, we grew in technology,
Yeah.
but up here, we haven't,
Mm-hmm.
you know? It's kind of like, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little controversial right now, but it's same thing like parents. There's a really funny video that showed how parents through the years keep blaming other things except their parenting.
Mm-hmm.
So in you know, in the 60s, sorry, in the 30s was movies, in the 40s was, you know, comic books, in the 50s was TV, in the 60s, sorry, radio, in the 60s was movies again, in the 70s was TV, in the 80s was rock, in the 90s was hip hop, in the 2000s social media. No, in the 2000s is whatever, I forget. In 2010s is social media.
Yeah.
And now in 2020s is still social media. And in 2000, in the 2000s was YouTube. And the 2010s is social media. And now people still gonna blame social media. Why? Because there was also something about video games.
Yeah, the games.
The games.
I was thinking about that one. I was like,
yeah, video games too. So like, there's a lot of people that are gonna blame anything. They're gonna find an excuse to blame something else instead of looking inwards and saying, "Hey, maybe I'm a shitty parent."
It's always easier to look at something and blame something for anything. It's
Right.
easier, it's always easier to be point a finger at someone else rather than point a finger at yourself.
Oh, of course.
It's always easier to say it was somebody else's mistake and not yours.
Mm-hmm.
And man, that's across the board. And everything.
Now, I want to turn a little bit
Yes.
to positive, because we've been kind of like,
Yeah.
What celebrity have you felt that either was canceled unjustly or is making like a redemption that from something that happened years ago? That you could be like, oh, this is a success story. I like it.
Damn. I did have one. I was thinking about one earlier today, and you know what? I slipped my mind. Hold on, I'm thinking, because I did have one that was canceled and started making kind of like a comeback, you know. But I'm thinking. Go ahead and give me yours while I think.
So for me, it's Macaulay Culkin.
Okay.
Macaulay Culkin and Brenda Song.
Mm.
We have seen those pictures, especially if you grew up, you know, in high school during the 2010s. We saw Macaulay Culkin when he was on drugs, when he was basically homeless, and he was in heroin, and he was like consuming a bunch of stuff. And Brenda Song used to be also a very controversial figure because, you know, they were just kid actors and they don't know how to handle a lot of like normal social stuff. Yeah. And to see them now together, happy as a family, to see Macaulay Culkin get the star, the Hollywood star, to see him actually get praised for now, you know, becoming a better figure. And I love how he is so brother of his, he's so proud of his brother Kieran that he's also like, yeah, bro, like, yeah, you know, I love those stories of like, yes, they were in a very rough spot. Yes, they were in a terrible moment, but now they're on the come up. They're now, you know, reaching a new level. Kind of like Lindsay Lohan, kind of like
Miley Cyrus,
kind of like Britney Spears, kind of like all of those people.
Well, Britney has kind of gone in a weird.
I mean, now, but like
now she's kind of going into a weird situation.
Yeah, but like before, like,
but she did have her
really weird moments, and then she came up again, and she started doing good music again, or whatever. Now, I don't know about now, but
Justin Bieber,
I love the fact that he
had a period where, you know, it was very rough for him.
Yeah,
and that disconnect from whatever was causing that, you know, his issues, and then he kind of got it together and started making. Again, bangers.
Not only bangers,
he's
but
always
like,
made good music.
Yeah, but not only bangers. It's also his change of lifestyle. I think that he has calmed down a lot when it comes to a lot of those things.
For sure.
So to see him kind of like not be so rambunctious, not be annoying, not be a fucking asshole, I love that. I love seeing people like redeem themselves.
I do know like that he
Christensen.
I think I did know that he had like an episode where he was like on a concert drunk singing. I don't know if you saw that one. Yeah, I think there was one episode with a song that didn't come out too long ago with Kid Laroi, and he was like singing, and he seemed like he was a bit drunk and a little bit off of it. And Kid Laroi just kind of was just going off with it, but he was, you know, acting a little bit weird and going off. But hey, listen, they're human.
Yeah,
they're going through a lot of things.
They're going through human experiences,
and you know, I'm sure going on a I don't know if they were touring, but I'm sure if you're touring is insane.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I don't
Like
know.
we don't know what that's like.
Yep.
And I have friends that are musicians, and they tell me like touring is hard because
Rough.
I have friends that are in metal bands, and they tell me like, bro, we went like through 6 or 7 different states, and we had to sleep in a fucking van. Imagine 6 fucking dudes sleeping in a van with their instruments. It smells like shit. You feel like shit. Everything is shit. But
Yeah.
the day of, it's like magic, and they tell me like, bro, I was feeling this and this and this. So it has its ups and downs.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's a few more that've gotten canceled and everything. Sorry, right now I can just think of the negative ones. I am in a negative space right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy. Look, it's easy to be negative. It's easy to just think of the shit. It's easy to just to put down somebody. It's easy. It's easy. So that's why I also want to try to make it a little bit more with levity, because I don't know what do you have to say. Okay, let's do something. What actor or actress do you feel like had a terrible run in their career, but now it's like, now I really want to see what you're gonna do next. Now you've convinced me that you're a good actor or a good actress.
Robert Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson, with what?
Well, he had the Twilight,
Of course,
which put him out there, and people would just be like, "You're the Twilight guy. You're the Twilight guy." And then, but beneath that Twilight guy has always been an amazing actor. Robert Pattinson for me is a great actor, and he's released really good films. Right? I actually watched Mikey 17 not long ago. Phenomenal. I love Bo Jung-ho. I think that's how you pronounce his name, the director. I really like him from The Parasite, but Mikey 17 was great. Robert Pattinson was awesome. I did like the Batman. I think he was pretty cool.
Phenomenal.
And then he has had more. The Tenet movie also was really good.
He had the Lighthouse.
The Lighthouse was really good with Robert Eggers.
Yeah.
It was great. I mean,
and Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, he's after that Twilight, that people were kind of like, he started coming up with like really kind of like indie for a little bit, and then he started racing again, and now he's like top.
Well, on the spirit of that, I think Kristen Stewart, I think also she's a really good actress. It's just that people knew her from the Twilight series.
Got
and
labeled.
She got labeled. Yeah, correct. But after that, she made a wrestling movie where I thought she was like awesome.
Recently, right?
Yeah.
That one came out recently.
Yeah, and I've seen her more in like very experimental movies that I'm like, fuck yeah.
It's because that's, I think, what the move should be, right? Because I think kind of that's the same way Robert Pattinson was doing, and he kind of started making these movies. I think he's even done in the voice acting for The Boy in the Heron, which was phenomenal.
Yeah.
So, I think they need to continue to experiment, and it's positively working.
Yeah, and something like, even though he for the most part has made really good movies, and he hasn't had like crazy controversies. Oh my god, I forgot his name. I was about to say Harry Potter. Daniel Radcliffe.
Mr. Potter.
Mr. Potter. But Daniel Radcliffe has made some really cool movies, like
Swiss Army Man.
Swiss Army Man.
That was fun.
That was awesome. He went into theater for a while, doing Equius, doing like a lot of plays.
Yeah, he was in New York, in Broadway, doing a few shows.
And then he had to show his balls, and because it's part of the show, because they were. I believe it was funny because they were talking about how like. It was like, oh my god, he showed us his wand and his chamber of secrets or whatever. But I love that also he was in like the Weird Al Yankovic movie. He was, he's done a lot of really experimental stuff, which I love. Like now, I'm glad that he's able to like all of them are able to step away from that flagship character that they had. To now, they're Robert Pattinson. They're, Kristen Stewart. They're Daniel Radcliffe. They're, there are people and there are actors, not just they are Harry Potter, they're Edward, they're Bella.
They're not the character that they were labeled, that they played once.
Correct.
They came out of that.
That's why, like, I was really hopeful, but honestly, I don't think she has been very good outside of Star Wars, and it's Daisy Ridley.
Okay.
I think she was tremendous in Star Wars, but afterwards, I don't feel like I've seen her in that many strong stuff that I could be like, yes, Daisy Ridley, you fucking rock. I'm very hopeful that she is, because you can tell that she has really good chops. You can tell that she has really good, backing when it comes to being an actress. But, whereas somebody like, Adam Driver, yes, he was in Star Wars. That's the least that he's known for.
Yeah.
He has Marriage Story. He has a bunch of stuff. I think he's more known for how he walks than the characters that he plays. How he walks, he's always like, like stepping hard.
I still remember that meme of when he took off his shirt on the Star Wars.
Oh, that he looked like a Lego block. Yeah.
I mean, it's
Black
good.
Klansman. Oh my God, that was such a good movie, Black Klansman.
Yeah.
Oh, also, another guy that was in Black Klansman, Topher Grace, that he was Eric from that 70s show, which is a tremendous show. It's a little bit weird seeing it now, especially after a few actors got canceled out of that.
Yeah.
But Topher Grace stepping out of that, yes, he had the terrible Spider-Man 3 as Venom. Yes, it was a terrible choice, but I love the fact that he has been able to, do a lot of things that are super beneficial to him, and that he's not Eric from that 70s show. He's now Topher Grace. I just love that. I love when people are not typecast into what they were once.
Yeah.
And they are able to get out of that.
Dave Bautista is doing a lot of that.
Oh, yes, dude.
He has always wanted to act, which is awesome. Very commendable. And I love the fact that he took Drax. And everybody was like, Drax. But he's been trying so hard to make it out of that.
Yeah.
And putting a lot of work on his craft. And I think it's really good. He was in Dune, right? He was
Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the Woods.
In the
Woods. Cabin in the Woods. He was in the Glass Onion, which is the follow-up of Knives Out.
Yeah.
He's putting himself out there, and I think that's great for him.
And I love the fact that he's trying to get away from the stereotype that he has to be the big, gigantic, muscly idiot. Because he was in Spectre. He was in a few movies where he was just a muscle guy that made you laugh of how
And he's done a few of those.
Of course,
I think he has like one, You're a Spy or something, where he's like a spy or nanny, something weird. I don't know.
That was The Rock.
No, he has one too.
Oh, really?
I think he has one too, if I'm not mistaken. Well, also Vin Diesel had one.
Yeah, Vin Diesel had one. Yeah.
I mean, they've done the questionable ones.
Yeah.
You know who got stuck on that? Vin Diesel. The Fast and Furious. That's it.
Because that's the only thing that he wants to do, because he tried to do Bloodspot? Red Spot? No.
Bloodshot.
Red Shot? Something like that. Yeah.
Which had really cool effects.
It had really cool effects, but like he tried to play the same way that he plays Dom Toretto, which actually he did a movie years ago, like 30 years ago, where he played a lawyer, and that's when he had hair. And he did really good. He was amazing in that movie. So to me, the fact that he just doesn't want to like do that kind of stuff anymore, it's like, really, bro? Or the fact that he doesn't embrace how Henry Cavill is, that he just goes, because he's a huge fan of Dungeons and Dragons. He's made collaborations with Critical Role. He's had his own channel doing that. I think he should lean into it. Maybe, I don't know, do another Dungeons and Dragons movie, or do something with a TTRPG backing, that he could be the lead character. He doesn't have to be like me.
I am good.
Actually, it was amazing in Groot.
Yeah,
he was tremendous in Groot, as Groot.
Yeah,
but
you can say the same thing about
Bradley Cooper.
Bradley Cooper was fucking
phenomenal. Yeah. 100%.
As Rocket, wow, dude.
But great. You know who to me is the standout out of all the Guardians of the Galaxy? Karen Gillan.
She was really good.
She's amazing. Awesome. She, like, the level of depth that she is able to bring on Nebula, not only as a badass bitch and a fucking ruthless killer, but also that scene in the first one where she's like, I just wanted a sister. I was like, oh, I felt that in my fucking chest. That rattled my ribs. I was like, yes. And also the level, like for example, when she talks to Rocket, how she's always so caring about Rocket, and how she's sometimes like a bumbling idiot because she doesn't know how to treat people right. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I do like her a lot.
If you have any more suggestions of actors that actually had either stepped out of the comfort zone that they had, or the surprise actors that you're like, oh, I would love to see them as more in that, please do let us know. Please leave it in the comment section.
Yes.
Where can people find you, brother, in social media?
You guys can find me as Dan Valder in Instagram. That's it.
And you can find me as Juan Fe Sierra or Juan Fe Sierra Cortez in most platforms. You want to sign us off?
Yeah, I mean, again, like you said, make sure you leave your comments down below. Please like and subscribe to the video, and we'll see you on Mondays at 7 p.m.
Goodbye.
Peace.